she was able to begin exploiting me as well at 12 years old. So she was 38. She treated me as if I was, one, a son, and two, somebody that she was in a relationship with. I grew up in Southern California. My mother moved there when I was very young. My mother was an alcoholic, and so was her boyfriend, and her boyfriend had tried to take her life. So she left from New York and we moved to Los Angeles, and we were homeless when I was very young. I remember I was subjected to child porn as a young boy and left with a lot of many strange people. And because me and my older brother were both involved in that, he kept doing that stuff to me as I grew up. We lived in a bunch of different places. Then my mother met another man who became my stepfather. My mother and stepfather got along until I was maybe 10 or 11, and then they started fighting and he started leaving. My mother started leaving too, so I was home alone for days at a time. I met some kids at the local pool. There was a pool, like a swimming pool 3 blocks from my house, where you could go pay 50 cents and go swim. Met some kids there. Their auntie she was a mother of 2. She was married. She allowed all the kids to come over to her house all the time, smoke, cigarettes, drink, do drugs. And these kids invited me over there. And when I started going over to this house, she'd asked me where my mother was. I was 12 years old. I don't know. And she said, well, you can come over here anytime you want. You can stay here. Eventually, her and my mother had some sort of a conversation, and a deal worked out where I just went and stayed with this woman and her family. I didn't really talk a lot. I was a quiet, afraid child. This woman really embraced me and started paying attention to me, buying me clothes and food and telling me she wouldn't let people hurt me anymore, that I was safe with her, because I was afraid all the time. So this woman, she told me that her husband, that she needed me to sleep in bed with her because I didn't feel safe. And she started with touching, back scratching, a lot of positive words of affirmation, a lot of empathy and sympathy. And then because I was a vulnerable child, I didn't have anybody who loved and cared for me, to watch out for me. She was able to begin exploiting me as well at 12 years old. So she was 38. I didn't, for a long time, think that mattered or counted because of media. It's a big reason that I share that part of my story, because under any public media about a female child, there will be comments about how the child is lucky, wanting to know what she looked like, where were these women when I was a child. She treated me as if I was, one, a son, and two, somebody that she was in a relationship with. It was very confusing and difficult for me when I got punished, such as, oh, you can't go to the drive-in with your friends because you didn't have sex with me. It was a really twisted, awful dynamic. I was scared to tell anybody. I was embarrassed and ashamed that this was happening to me. And it was difficult in school because other boys my age were starting to have girlfriends and I wasn't allowed to have a girlfriend. To explain to my friends, I would just tell them that, hey, I don't think that girl's very pretty. So my friends used to just think I was like this picky, stuck-up person when it came to girls. And I really, I thought those girls were beautiful. When I was 14, my foster mother told me that she had gotten pregnant and had had an abortion and that it was mine. I didn't know how to feel about that as a 14-year-old. I just felt really sad and hollow, and I started to feel sad and hollow all the time. And I stopped eating. My foster mom didn't encourage me to eat, didn't offer food, would deny me food again. And by that time, I felt like being hungry was a way of being in control, and I lost a lot of weight. When I was 16, she had caught me myself. I was walking home from somewhere. She pulled up and told me to get in the car, that we were taking a drive. She started driving very fast. And I was kind of used to this because whenever she was angry, she would drive the car fast. In later research, I realized that that's actually a form of physical abuse. She was going like 90, 100 miles per hour, running red lights, and I don't remember her exact words, but she said, "Since you want to kill yourself, I'm going to go ahead and help you out, and I'm going to kill both of us, and I'm going to drive us off of the cliff." So I leaned my foot over, I put my foot on the brakes, and the car started to spin. It spun out on the side into a strawberry field. I reached over, and the gear shift was on the steering wheel. I put it into park, and she was screaming and hitting and clawing me, and I took the keys, and I jumped out of the car, and I threw the keys as hard as I could out into the field, and then I ran. I walked back to the neighborhood. I waited until I didn't see anybody in the house. I went in, I got a duffel bag and put a couple pairs of clothes in my duffel bag and a jacket. I walked out of that foster home for the very last time. I thought, how am I ever gonna make it? I'm 16 years old, I've got nothing. How am I ever gonna, do I go to college? How am I gonna graduate high school? How am I ever gonna pay for a place to live and food and a car? And there's no hope. I have no hope. When I was 17, almost 18, my biological mother found me. I was walking near the store that I worked at, and she drove up in her car and jumped out of the car and hugged me and said she'd been looking for me and asked me if I wanted to go live with her. And she had moved away to Palmdale, which was outside of Los Angeles. And I didn't really have any other option, so I moved back in with my biological mother, started going back to high school, and I just tried to forget everything that happened. I just pretended that everything was normal, that I had never been gone, that my mother had never done those things to me. She had done some work on herself and became a school teacher. When she told me I had to leave after I was 18, I joined the Navy. The Navy really saved my life. I got sober for a couple years. I started, attending 12-step meetings, and I just didn't really want to deal with the past again. I didn't like to talk about it. I didn't like to tell anyone. It would come out once in a while, or I knew something bad happened, and I just didn't want to think about the bad things that happened. I just wanted to be good and healthy and do the right things, and it just kept creeping in, where I would have rages. Like I had a girlfriend, and we got in an argument, and I had this overwhelming just rage and horror, and I just punched myself in the face, and then I was embarrassed about that. Like, what kind of a person punches themselves in the face while they're arguing with their girlfriend? I didn't like people to touch me. I had weird reactions to things that I didn't understand why. I just thought I was weird and abnormal, and wanted to hide that from everybody. And eventually I had a relapse on alcohol. Things got pretty bad pretty fast. I had done or MD during my last relapse, and that was the first time I had ever really, really felt good. My friend who saved my life were playing with a firearm when I had about 4 months sober, and he in an accident. I got arrested here in San Diego. I got charged with first-degree murder, and here in California, if you commit a violent felony with a firearm, there's an extra 10 years added on to your sentence automatically. And so I was 23 years old looking at spending 35 years to life in prison. I had just gotten out of the Navy before this happened. I went on trial I told the truth. The proceedings before there was a jury trial, the district attorney said that I could plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter and just go to prison for 10 years instead of 35 to life. But I would have had to say that I did it on purpose. And I couldn't do that because I loved my friend very much. And I didn't necessarily care about whether or not I went to prison. I felt that I deserved to go because I was in so much pain and regret and horror over seeing my friend die in front of me. A year and a month later, there was a jury trial and I got acquitted of all charges. And I walked out free, living in my car and hating myself. And I had promised my friend that I wouldn't commit suicide. So I went back into the military and I volunteered to be a hospital foreman who goes with the Marines to go fight. And I went to Iraq in 2004 with the full intention of not coming home. Instead of, I gained a sense of honor back in my life, developed strong bonds and relationships with other men, trauma bonded with them, and I had the opportunity to try to saving someone else, but I didn't. I lived. And when I was like 38, my relationship had gone through a really rough patch with the woman that I love, who I've been with since 2006. She threw me out of the house. My business was failing. I found myself with a in my head, feeling a tremendous amount of pain. And another veteran reached out to me, and I went through a veterans treatment program that specifically addressed childhood trauma. Really surprised how many other people had had similar experiences, and that uncovered, and I started to remember. I started to remember more and more that those things did happen, and I started to learn about the human subconscious. After my friend died in that accident, every time I closed my eyes, I saw a bullet hole in his head, and I screamed. And so it took me a long time. I disassociated away and kept myself busy. And when it was time to learn how to meditate 15 years later, that was not easy to sit still and meditate. And it took another man to tell me, hey dude, maybe stop being a weenie and just sit down and meditate. Do it. I have a practice where when a new memory is uncovered, like when I remembered that there were bad, evil people filming, doing sex to me as just a little precious baby boy, I was just a little innocent child, just helpless. I did the meditation, and the meditation is I'll close my eyes, I'll imagine myself walking, and I use a lot, I'll shorten it because I use so many markers to make it more visceral. But essentially, I get up, I get in the helicopter flies back in time, the soldiers get out of the helicopter with me and kill the bad people and rescue the little me and take him away in the helicopter and put him in a treehouse with everything he needed, right? So I can do that, and we can go back and do inner child rescue. If I can speak to anyone else who is a child who's going through that, I'm going to say that I believe you and that you're worthy and that you have to fight. You have to fight, but you can make it. You can make it. Make it through anything.